listen to me right now. If you've ever felt the sting of choosing love and being handed pain instead, this is for you. If you've ever made yourself smaller to keep the peace, quieter to stay safe, softer so someone else wouldn't leave, stay. This story begins exactly where pain tried to end her. I want you to understand something deeply. She didn't wake up powerful. Power was not her personality, it was her decision. For years, she carried pain like it was her responsibility. She explained other people's cruelty. She apologized for their neglect. She told herself that enduring hurt made her loyal, made her good, made her worthy of love. And every time she chose silence over truth, her body remembered. Every time she swallowed her anger, her spirit paid the price. Pain has a way of disguising itself as patience, as sacrifice, as strength. But it isn't. Pain, when normalized, becomes a cage you decorate so you can survive inside it. And she did survive barely. She survived by dimming her voice, by betraying her own needs, by telling herself this is just how love is, until one moment, small, quiet, unremarkable to anyone else, changed everything. It wasn't rage that woke her up. It was grief. Grief for the woman she was becoming by staying. Grief for the boundaries she never drew. Grief for the truth she kept abandoning. And in that grief, she saw it clearly. Pain had cost her more than it ever gave her. So she made a choice that terrified her. She chose herself not loudly, not perfectly, but honestly. And that's where power begins. Choosing herself didn't feel brave at first. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with no guarantee of ground below. Power is often mistaken for confidence, but what she felt was fear, raw, shaking, undeniable, being judged. Fear of being alone. Fear that if she stopped accepting pain, she would lose everything she had worked so hard to keep. And here's the truth we don't say out loud enough. Choosing power often means choosing uncertainty. She had been taught quietly, repeatedly, that a good woman absorbs discomfort, that her worth was measured by how much she could tolerate without breaking. So when she finally said no, her body reacted before her mind did. Her heart raced, her hands trembled, guilt rushed in like a wave, whispering that she was selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. Pain tries to cling to you by using shame as its language. But something had shifted. For the first time, she didn't run back to soothe everyone else. She sat with the discomfort. She let the guilt burn through her without obeying it. She realized that guilt was not proof of wrongdoing. It was proof of conditioning. And that realization cracked something open inside her. Power, she discovered, isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Power is the quiet moment when you don't explain your boundary, when you don't over-justify your needs, when you let someone be disappointed and you don't rush in to fix it. That was new territory for her. Uncomfortable, lonely, liberating. She started to notice how much energy pain had been stealing, how much creativity, joy, and clarity had been consumed by managing other people's emotions. Each time she chose honesty over harmony, she felt exposed, but also strangely lighter. Like she was finally standing upright after years of bending. Power wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision not to let fear choose for her anymore. As she kept choosing power, something unexpected happened. The people who benefited from her pain began to resist her change. Not gently, not quietly. They questioned her, labeled her, told her she was different now, as if growth were an accusation. And this is one of the hardest truths. When you stop abandoning yourself, some people will accuse you of abandoning them. She felt the pull to explain, to soften, to make herself palatable again. Old habits don't die easily. She had spent years translating her needs into something less threatening, something easier for others to digest. But this time, she noticed how explaining drained her, how every justification reopened wounds she was trying to heal. So she stopped performing her pain for approval. There was grief in this stage, real grief. The loss of imagined futures, the loss of relationships that only worked when she was smaller. She mourned the version of love she had hoped would one day arrive if she just tried harder. Letting go wasn't dramatic. It was quiet and heavy, like setting down something you carried for too long and realizing how bruised your hands are. And yet beneath the grief something solid formed. Discernment. She learned to tell the difference between discomfort that leads to growth and pain that leads to erasure, between love that challenges you and love that consumes you. That clarity didn't come from books or advice. It came from listening to her body when it said, "This is not safe anymore." Power taught her boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They don't keep love out. They keep truth in. And as she honored those boundaries, she began to trust herself again. Not the self who endured everything, but the self who could walk away without needing permission. With every boundary she held, she began to hear her own voice more clearly. Not the voice shaped by fear or rehearsed for acceptance, but the one that had been buried under years of accommodation. It surprised her, steady, direct, unapologetic. She realized how long she had been narrating her life through other people's expectations instead of her own truth. Power changed how she spoke, but more importantly, it changed how she listened. She stopped ignoring the quiet signals. The tightness in her chest, the exhaustion after certain conversations, the heaviness that followed self-betrayal. Her body had been keeping score long before her mind was ready to catch up. Pain had taught her endurance. Power taught her awareness. This awareness wasn't always comfortable. It meant recognizing patterns she once excused. It meant admitting that love without respect is not devotion. It's depletion. That hope without boundaries is not optimism. It's denial's realization stung because they dismantled stories she had built her identity around. But truth, even when painful, is lighter than a lie you carry every day. She began to understand that strength is not measured by how much you survive, but by how much you refuse to normalize. Refuse to call harm normal. Refuse to call neglect patience. Refuse to call self-abandonment love. Every refusal felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she thought was gone forever. And here's the quiet miracle: the more she trusted her inner knowing, the less she needed external validation. Power rooted her inward. She didn't need to be chosen anymore because she had already chosen herself. Power didn't make her cold. That's the lie people tell when a woman stops over giving. What power actually gave her was warmth without self-sacrifice. She still cared deeply, but she no longer bled for belonging. And that distinction changed everything. She noticed how differently she showed up in the world. Not sharper, not harder, just clearer. She stopped negotiating her worth in conversations, stopped laughing at things that hurt, stopped staying silent to keep the emotional temperature comfortable for everyone else. And the relief of that honesty, it was profound. Exhaustion began to loosen its grip. Pain had taught her to equate love with effort. If it was hard, it must be meaningful. If it hurt, it must be real. Power dismantled that myth. She learned that mutuality feels calm. That respect doesn't require self-erasure. That safety is not boring. It's healing. Some connections deepened. Others fell away. And instead of chasing what left, she asked a new question: what in me stayed? What stayed was integrity. Self-respect. The ability to sit alone without collapsing into self-doubt. Loneliness no longer terrified her because loneliness with self-trust is quieter than togetherness with betrayal. She began to experience joy without bracing for impact, to rest without guilt, to say no without rehearsing explanations in her head. These weren't small changes, they were revolutionary. Each one rewired a nervous system that had learned to survive instead of live. Power didn't remove her tenderness. It protected it. And for the first time, her softness existed alongside strength, not in opposition to it. As her power settled in, she realized something startling. Pain had once been her compass. She had learned to measure love by anxiety, closeness by chaos, importance by how urgently she was needed. When the chaos faded, she felt disoriented. Calm felt unfamiliar. Peace felt suspicious. And she had to unlearn the belief that stability meant something was missing. This was the work no one applauds. The quiet rewiring, the moments when she wanted to reach back into old patterns just to feel something recognizable. Healing, she learned, can feel like boredom to a nervous system trained in survival. Power required patience, not with others, but with herself. She began to ask harder questions. Not, why wasn't I enough? But why did I stay where I had to disappear? That shift changed the entire narrative. It returned agency to her story. She was no longer the passive recipient of pain. She was the author of her choices moving forward. There were days she grieved the intensity she mistook for love. Days she missed the drama, the highs and lows, the illusion of closeness, but she didn't confuse missing a feeling with needing to relive it. Growth gave her the ability to feel nostalgia without self-betrayal. Power taught her to sit in the middle ground, where life is steady, emotions are honest, and love doesn't demand self-destruction. That steadiness didn't numb her, it grounded her. And in that groundedness, she found a deeper kind of passion, the passion of being fully present in her own life. With power came responsibility, the kind no one prepares you for. The responsibility to stop repeating what hurt you, to notice when old wounds tried to drive new decisions, to pause instead of react. Power wasn't just about leaving pain behind, it was about refusing to pass it forward. She saw how easy it would be to harden, to armor up, to confuse boundaries with walls. But power asked more of her than protection. It asked for integrity. She chose to stay open without staying exposed, vulnerable without being unguarded. That balance was fragile, learned through trial and error, but it was hers. She started telling the truth sooner, not after resentment built, not after silence calcified. She spoke when it mattered, even when her voice shook, especially when her voice shook. Because power doesn't erase fear, it invites courage to walk alongside it. In this space, she redefined forgiveness, not as reconciliation, not as forgetting, but as releasing herself from the role of carrying what was never hers to hold. Forgiveness became an internal act of freedom, not an external obligation. She also learned that empathy without boundaries is self-harm. That compassion doesn't require access. That understanding someone's wounds does not obligate her to endure them. These realizations didn't make her less loving. They made her love sustainable. Power matured her. It slowed her down. It gave her the wisdom to choose relationships where repair was mutual and accountability was real. And in doing so, she stopped confusing endurance with devotion. As her life grew quieter, it also grew truer. The noise that once filled her days, constant explaining, anticipating, fixing, began to fade. In its place came space. And in that space, she met herself without distraction. Not the version shaped by survival, but the one formed by choice. She noticed how her intuition sharpened when it wasn't drowned out by urgency, how clarity arrives when you stop rushing to be understood. Power gave her the ability to wait, to watch behavior instead of believing promises, to let patterns reveal themselves without forcing outcomes. Patience became a form of self-respect. She also became more selective with her energy, not because she was superior, but because she was finally aware of its value. Time, attention, emotional labor, these were no longer unlimited resources she handed out to anyone who asked. She invested where there was reciprocity, where effort flowed both ways. This selectiveness wasn't isolation, it was alignment. Her relationships became fewer, but deeper. Conversations more honest. Lauder less performative. She didn't need to be everything to everyone. She needed to be real with a few. Power softened her relationship with herself. She spoke internally with kindness instead of criticism. When she stumbled, she didn't shame herself for not being healed enough. She understood that growth is not linear and strength is not perfection. And in this new quiet, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: trust, not in outcomes, not in people, but in herself. And that trust changed how she walked through the world. By now, power wasn't something she reached for. It was something she lived from. It showed up in the way she walked away sooner, in how she didn't wait for proof of betrayal to honor discomfort, in how she trusted the first whisper instead of the final scream. Pain had taught her to doubt herself. Power restored her authority. She no longer romanticized struggle. She no longer believed that love should feel like endurance training. What moved her now was consistency, presence, effort that didn't need persuasion. She chose people who chose her back, not perfectly, but intentionally. There was a moment she realized she wasn't angry anymore, not numb, not detached, just complete. The anger had done its job. It had protected her long enough for clarity to arrive. And when clarity came, resentment loosened its grip. Not because the past made sense, but because it no longer controlled her. She stopped telling her story from the place of injury. She told it from authorship, from ownership, from wisdom earned the hard way. Pain became context, not identity, a chapter, not the whole book. Power also changed how she loved. She loved with eyes open, with boundaries intact, with the courage to leave if respect disappeared. And because of that, her love was no longer desperate. It was generous. She understood now power isn't domination. It's alignment. It's living so honestly that you don't need permission to be at peace. And that understanding prepared her for the final truth she would carry forward. And here is the final truth: choosing power over pain is not a single act. It is a lifetime commitment. It is waking up each day and deciding that your spirit matters more than anyone's approval. It is honoring your boundaries even when others resist. It is saying yes to yourself, yes to clarity, yes to courage, even when fear knocks at the door. She realized that power is not loud declarations or grand gestures. It is the quiet, unshakable decision to refuse self-betrayal. It is the grace of standing firm without bitterness, of moving forward without apology, of loving without losing yourself. It is the knowledge that you can endure without enduring everything. By choosing power, she reclaimed the energy pain had stolen. She reclaimed her voice, her joy, her capacity to trust herself again. She reclaimed the life she had long imagined, but never believed she could live. And in doing so, she became the woman she was always meant to be, not defined by what hurt her, but by what she refused to surrender to. So if you have ever stood at the crossroads of pain and power, remember this: pain can teach you lessons, but power can transform your life. And transformation is not about denying what you've endured. It's about choosing what you will no longer allow to define you. Power is not just what you claim for yourself. It is the life you create because you dared to choose it. And that is where freedom begins.